work with Rajiv to make sure that they get the right information. So I'm going to put together a little one-pager with the lawyer tomorrow to make sure that we get that information out for anyone who wants to give it to their counsel and or contact Rajiv directly. So we're working on this and have been since we've received the notice to make sure that we're prepared. So we have one of Canada's leading regulatory lawyers as part of our team, and we had for years, and we're well prepared for this. So if there's any questions on how to get some legal questions out or anything like that, please contact me directly at dtempest@thecva.org, and I'll make sure that I get your questions into the lawyer or get you in contact with them as this comes out. Without question, this has been the largest attack on the industry, and that we believe that EPS or Edmonton Police Services is obviously overstepping here when there's no provincial legislation or regulation. There's been some confusing messages that have come out in terms of whether they have the right to do so or not. But I think we're all in agreement that we will fight them. And thank you, Sean, for all the interviews that you've done. Sean has really put himself in the limelight. Never an easy thing to do, but I think he's represented us extremely well, and both as a board member and more importantly as a shop owner and manufacturer. Sean's been in this industry for a long time, and he's explaining that the youth uptake issue is an issue, but it's an issue we've tried to address since day one. And the first step that the industry took, and very responsibly so, was adult-only access. And it's a message that we're not getting out as strongly as we would like because it's not being picked up. So as I go into the federal update, I'll really be able to describe why I feel what's happening in Ottawa and what's happening in Edmonton have a lot of parallels. And as we work through this, youth uptake isn't the only issue out there. The biggest issue is that this is Canada's leading cause of preventable death, and that can't get lost in the message. And if we have to do 100 interviews or 1,000 interviews and op-eds and press releases, we will, to make sure that message isn't lost on Canadians. So with that, I'll pause and unmute everyone and take any questions from the floor. So just give me a moment as I walk down the list.
Muted.
Oh.
Muted.
I'll pause that one. Okay, so everyone's unmuted. Is there any questions from the floor? If you can, just mute yourself. Okay, are there any questions, comments? It's really important that we hear from you guys, from the group as well. You can raise your hand as well. I can even go to our panel. Anita, did you have any comments that you'd like to share so far from your experience?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
I do have a meeting to meet with the MLA, but they're all in Calgary this week right now. So she's going to get back to me on a time.
Oh, there's a convention down there?
Yeah, there's something going on in Calgary. She says they're all gone till Friday.
Okay, that's good to know because they haven't responded. I've made multiple requests into the health unit in at Edmonton and have yet to hear from anybody.
Yeah, she says they're all gone till Friday.
Yeah. So I think the key is on this one, and it's similar to the campaign that we ran in Ontario last year, and it's certainly one we're going to deploy federally, which is our target is to try to get at least 50 calls to every MLA across the province. Maria and I were looking at the other day. I believe, Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, there's 88 MLA's offices. So if and Sean, how many vape shops do we think there are across the province of Alberta? A little over 100.
Sounds about right to me, man.
Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood, right? So that means that if there's a little over 100, every shop within every region should be able to get about 40 people to call. So that includes the shop owners themselves. So I always go over this, but you can, as a shop owner, you can make 2 calls. The first call is in which the riding you live, and then you ask for a meeting, and I'll get into core messages here further on the presentation. And also, as a business owner, you can call your MLA, assuming that your business and your home are located in different ridings. So that gives you 2 touch points. Your employees as well, and then as many customers as you can. The key is not to yell or anything else, but it's really to stick to the facts. So as we go through that core messaging, and I'll be making this presentation available on the CVA members page, and I'll get Sean to make it available on the Alberta Vapers advocates page, is that we need to come across as a maturing industry that really gets that we're part of society, right? And that we are very concerned, just as everyone else is, with any sort of youth uptake of controlled substances. That doesn't mean that we should take we should address this life-saving device as anything other than being critical to the health system and to harm reduction in Canada. Okay, so any other questions? Has anyone heard anything? Is there, has anybody's MLA got back to them? Or if you live in Edmonton, have you heard back from a city councillor? Okay. So I think with that, what I'll do is one of the commitments I'll make to this group is that I think we should probably start meeting with the Alberta contingent at least once a month, more if necessary. And I know the CVA is completely committed to that, so that if Edmonton Police Services start taking action, that not only are we getting the information from each individual action, but we're collecting as much information as possible. It's key for the lawyers, it's key for our comms team, and it's key for the materials that we're going to develop and release both on the member site and on the Alberta advocate site. So that will be the 2 main areas for information for everybody. I know Sam and his team are fully committed to help with materials over at Pack Smoke. I know Sean and Daniela and Nita have been working hard on materials, and Maria. And any support, any volunteer hours that we can get, please let us know. We'll certainly really put you to work. I think the last thing is that from a CVA perspective, I know this is an industry, but from a CVA perspective, is that the more members that we can get, the more we represent the industry within the province. So I think a membership drive, and Sam and I will be working on this a lot over the next 2 to 4 weeks, making sure that we show that that the Alberta manufacturers and retailers are really consolidated around that. It also helps with the legal file. So it allows us to consolidate arguments and making sure that we're all as well prepared as we can be. Okay. So I'll take one more moment to see if there's any hands or any comments. I'll unmute everyone again, just in case that someone didn't get to talk. I know it gets a little loud sometimes.
Unmuted.
Okay. Okay, Paul, we got you.
Muted.
You got a question or comment?
Hello?
Hi, Paul.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. I was just wondering about, well, we don't know what's happening in Edmonton, but all around the surrounding areas and other cities, obviously in the city of Edmonton, the police won't come out of town, obviously. Is there anything happening like with, I guess, RCMP, or do we know if they're getting involved too, or should,
I would be extremely surprised if the RCs make any sort of move here because that's their and there is federal legislation and regulation that is involved with that, but really it's the feds leave it up to tobacco enforcement officers to enforce the federal regulations as they stand and continue to develop. This move from EPS is obviously unprecedented, but I haven't heard a single thing. Sean, I don't know if you've heard anything about Calgary making a move or Red Deer or Lethbridge or anything like that.
No, man, just EPS in Edmonton proper.
Yeah, and that's all I've heard as well. So, but Paul, if we hear anything as a groundswell for any of the other municipalities, we'll be sure to make that announcement again on the CVA members page and on the Alberta Vapers Advocates page. Okay, so moving on. The reason that we think that this is that the federal and the provincial update for Alberta are important, and the reasons that they come together is that the youth uptake issue has been an issue that it's been really driven starting in the U.S. with the rates that they've had, and then have been picked up by Health Canada. I know we have Sean on the call, and I won't speak for him, but I'd like to give him a minute just to input as well as Sam did. Is coming up into the spring of last year. Really, the biggest issue that we had was naming conventions. You know, your strawberry shortcake versus, you know, sweet and fun or whatever that looked like. That was really an issue that we're going back and forth on. Then the youth uptake data started coming out of the U.S. and they started looking at it into Canada. So there's two parts to this. I think one is I think it's a phenomenal opportunity for us to really be able to highlight how the vaping community, which is in my mind doesn't include retail locations where you can get motor oil and gum and milk and juices, but it was dedicated professionals to the harm reduction opportunity that vaping provides. So we, as part of this update, received a letter, just like everyone else, because it was publicly posted by the health minister to the vaping associations asking about keeping the vape products out of the hands of youth. So obviously we felt that we had a strong position. So for any of those that follow the CVA, we've doubled down many times on our three core principles. So those three core principles are that adult-only access is the best way to address youth vaping, that a ban on national brand advertising is key to this. And we all have seen the videos of, you know, all the public displays for vaping products that are well positioned for youth and everyone else, including Hockey Night in Canada as an institution. And then the third is that any vaping product should be shipped via an age-verified shipping method, so that we know that the person who's signing for the products is age majority. So as we continue to go down this path, youth uptake is one issue. Right? There's been 60,000 flavors available. There, you know, depending on who you talk to, 60,000 flavors available for years. Youth uptake has nothing to do with flavors. What flavors are phenomenally positioned for is making sure that there's a successful transition from combustible to vaping and reducing harm. These aren't complicated messages, and these are messages that we reiterate time after time after time with government, because there's three major elements that need to be discussed and need to come through. Youth vaping is definitely one, And we want to make sure, and we've let the government know that we're as concerned as they are with any sort of youth uptake of this product. The second is that the harm reduction opportunity, unprecedented harm reduction opportunity within the Canadian narrative has been lost because of this. And that needs to be put back on the table. The third is that, as Sam mentioned, we get a quarterly meeting to discuss these items with Health Canada, including some emails back and forth and ancillary conversations and interactions. We believe that this is not nearly far enough. And that's why you'll see incidents like you saw in Quebec, or now more importantly, as we walk through the file in Edmonton and Alberta, whereas the narrative of the fact that this saves lives is completely being lost. And if you look at some of the interviews that Sean has done, or that I have done, or other members of the CVA, or other people from the industry at large, is that when we talk about the 95% safe, when we talk about the unprecedented harm reduction opportunity for Canadians, that all gets cut. It's all on the floor. A big part of the balance of this year is to make sure that that conversation doesn't get cut, right? That narrative comes back. And the best way to do that, and then the third pillar, is that the regulations right now federally are not nearly defined enough. So we've called on the government, the federal government, directly relating to the letter that they sent, to set up a industry advisory board that meets constantly, that has a strong mandate, that can get through the tactical issues, right? And we're going to be able to define and refine this to the point where, you know what, we can start tackling things like GMP standards, making sure that these products are safe for the people that ingest them, inhale them. You know what? 4 years ago, all we heard about was products being made in bathtubs. Okay, we can address that. It's not a cottage industry anymore. It's a major industry. And it has so many positive impacts on Canadian lives, and also on not just for smokers and for vapors, but what it can do for the health spend, and what it can do for overall public health. So we believe that a task force needs to be brought together so that we're dealing with these issues not in silos, but we're dealing with them together. As we come up to a federal election, we're going to make sure that this is an election issue. For those who joined us for our last industry call, we're very much campaigning, and there's a lot of vapors across this country that can certainly share their opinions of how this is a voting issue for them. I know Maria, for example, contacts her local politicians, both at a provincial level, municipal level, and every other level there is, to make sure that they understand that this is an election issue for her. Okay, so Scott, I'll get back to your question here in just a moment. So I think from that point is we've sent our letter to Health Canada. We sent our letter to the minister, fully articulating our positions, and looking for and to drive data, because data takes away a lot of the opinions out there that are uninformed opinions. So we're hearing data that smoking rates are down across the country. We should look closer at that. It's Health Canada's stated goal that smoking is 5% by 2030. We are their best opportunity to make sure that that happens as an industry, but also we need to start to monetize this about the amount of health savings that the system is going to receive. So, if I'm a non-smoker, and I have been my whole entire life, one of the things I'd like to learn is how we can attach better regulations and legislation to vaping to start balancing the budget, for example, and start making sure that healthcare spend goes to diseases that are not preventable, and research and so on and so forth. So these are the types of narratives that I think would come out of that. As well as we got great representation from our board on the SEC committees and other committees to make sure that devices are safe and that manufacturing processes are safe. As we develop as an industry, we've already put a ton of effort and thought into making sure that this industry grows in the most appropriate and safe way possible for Canadians. And we need to get that story out. To me, it's a critical one. So I'm going to pause there for a sec. So got a question from Scott. A good question for Health Canada is, since our last meeting, how many taxpayers have to die from preventable illness caused by tobacco? Yeah, I think, Scott, that's a part of a narrative that we've been working on with Health Canada for some time, is that it's really understanding the cost output and what it means for the health system, right? How many people die from combustible tobacco and smoking related disease? And I think being able to really get them to consider information from the UK as well, and what their pathway has been. We hear a lot about the FDA in the US here in Canada, as opposed to how much we hear from the UK. So it is an important question, and we continue to hammer that away. But we feel that by calling the minister out and by trying to force the federal government to the table, we just don't want the health minister's letter to be window dressing prior to an election. They threw down the gauntlet. We answered the gauntlet. We came back with a solution for them, rather than some sort of fluffy language that says you should do this. What our point is, we should do a whole host of things. Let's get together and have a real conversation for it. Scott's follow-up question is, since Health Canada seems to focus much more on profit in health space rather than public health. I appreciate the comment. What I will say is that the system itself is extremely complex. If you look at the crosses of where public spending, innovation, and then servicing, servicing health-related disease, they're very interwoven with insurance and with hospitals and home care and provincial budgets and transfer budgets and so on and so forth. I think if we're really going to get on this, really you got to start by realizing you have a problem is recognizing that you have one, right? Is that we need the government to really focus in on the fact that we have prescriptive solutions. These aren't opinions. Adult-only access is a solution for alcohol. It's a solution for cannabis, and it's a solution for vaping and tobacco. So that's really where we're trying to get the first strong step in having a more substantive conversation. S5 was whether, for all those that followed it, and the Tobacco and Vaping Products Act, that was the opening, right? Whether these products belong. And that has already been put to bed. So now comes some fights, like we had in Quebec, and successfully challenged, and just like we will challenge in Alberta. Another question from Paul is, what information you are giving to Health Canada and the government to prove it that it's 95% healthier? ? Is it a study from the UK? Yeah, obviously the Royal College of Physicians did some amazing work. We're constantly sending articles up to our resources, both at a federal level and provincial levels, with all the articles that come out. I think that one of the areas that the government can show some really good leadership is help to get some strong homemade studies. It's one of the things that we would put as an agenda item with the feds, because the vaping is still within contextual point of view, it's still fairly new, right? That's one thing we can't argue. But what we can say is, and it's not prove that it's 95% healthier. It's at least 95% healthier with new studies coming out all the time. So it's a real opportunity. The key is, and what's always worked well with the CVA in the industry, and it showed some great leadership from our early leaders, is that by staying together and working together, government knows that you're not going anywhere. Right, and it allows, and we've heard this statement lots of times, and the health minister used it, is the science is catching up. So as the science and more studies come out, so on and so forth, we're going to be able to tackle and hit all these foolish articles that are out in the newspapers. But more importantly, is that once you get government on side, and I'll remember one of the proudest moments I had, being the executive director of the CVA for as long as I have, was when the government posted on their own site, on the federal site, that vaping is safer than smoking, and that if you're a non-vapor or non-smoker, you shouldn't try, but if you are, you should vape rather than smoke, essentially. The reason I was so proud of that is if you talk to so many of your colleagues a year prior to that, and Kriegs, you'll remember this too, there was a question whether the government was just going to shut it down. That was everyone's big worry when I first came in. They're just going to shut it all down. And I think that's where Edmonton really has got to be a stance nationally for us, because essentially an independent municipal police service has made a decision to shut down an industry on their own. And we can't let that stand. So we're going to fight that at both at a provincial level and also showcase to the feds that this is the kind of dangers that can happen. Is there a plan in place to deal with the pushback from the Convenience Store Association? I haven't heard about any pushback, Laurie, from the C-Store channel. What are they going to push back on? I would imagine that the only place that they could push back would be against EPS. They certainly wouldn't push back against the vape shops. But I think from this matter is that the C-stores live in a world of power walls, right? From our perspective is that we're trying to change behaviors, right? We're trying to get people to switch from such a highly addictive product that they need education, that they need to be detailed. I think if I've heard this story once, I've heard it a million times. Someone starts vaping, they vape for 3 or 4 weeks, they have a cigarette, and the taste is so horrible to them they can't even imagine why they smoked it in the first place. Right? It's these little things that we're trying to validate in the minds of political leadership, both now at a municipal level in Edmonton, at all provincial levels, and at a federal level. So I haven't heard from the Convenience Store Association in terms of what their positioning is going to be on this, but I think from our position, if they are going to push back, is that they're going to say, well, we don't need power walls. That's it. Our position is that the best way to deal with the youth uptake issue, which is all we hear about at every level of government and every foolish article that's out there, it's youth uptake, youth uptake, youth uptake. Great. Put it in a place where youths can't get into. Pretty easy and pretty simple. I think they'll push back against that. And so the strategy is kids are getting it somewhere. The other thing, and Sam's talked to government about this a lot, is that head shops as well have to be addressed. So C-stores aren't the only place where people can get vaping products. Head shops sell vaping products as well. Okay. According to the Royal College of Physicians, the 5% risk includes social risk as per the 74-page study. Scott, there's lots of things in that study as well, and there's lots of other studies. I think the main argument is we know what smoking does, right? So let's spend more time on trying to develop the knowledge of vaping and studying vaping as a positive impact on society as opposed to a negative impact on society, because everything has been talked about its negative impacts on youth, which really restricts what we're going to be able to do to address the needs of nicotine delivery for adults. Adult restriction stores. The story is, this is from Lori. Adult restriction stores. The story is the Lori. So Lori's comment is that there's that convenience stores are being threatened if they don't sell a particular product like Vape and refuse to carry it. Then they'll lose a percentage from their cigarette sales. I'm not in the business, but from an adult restriction stores, I think our key is we go back to what the principles are, right? And the first principle is adult only access. We're talking about, and some will say it's a false epidemic. Some will say it's an uptake issue. It didn't exist until 2018. So it certainly has nothing to do with flavors. It certainly has nothing to do with how product vape shops, and that's defined in Ontario as with 85% of your sales coming from vape-related products. These issues didn't exist before. That's what we're trying to highlight. That's the key. Right? It certainly wasn't before they started putting advertisements on every single gas station and convenience store outside. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds here. Scott, how come did they? A 66 milligram limit, it sounds like it was created by Juul or Vape. So I don't have the answer to the 66 milligram limit. Sorry, who came up with it? I have no idea. Okay, so let me go back. I'm just going to unmute everyone quick and see if there's any other comments from the floor.
Unmuted.
Hello.
Hello? Are there any other questions? Hey, Maria, go ahead.
Hey, can I just make a comment?
Sure, of course.
I just want to just give everyone a little thing, and I don't know if wherever you are in this country and whoever's listening right now, I think it was 3 weeks ago, I got really frustrated in Northumberland, and that's kind of where I live, and we have one of our shops with, how many kids I've been personally seeing with vapor products. So I kind of lost my shit and found out a lot of stuff. So what I decided to do was, you know what, our TEOs don't have as much power as we believe they do. They work within a confinement of their own internal regulatory process. So I decided I'm going to go to my MPP's office and ask him to host a meeting. So we're having our first ever community vaping coalition meeting. So what's happening is we're trying to bring in as many stakeholders as possible. And I know that I let Sam know, and I gave Sam's contact. The Juul people, because they seem to have sale of Juul is high. The Vape people, because of things that I've seen. I've also invited, I'm going. The police department will be there. Our health department will be there, along with, I also invited Michael Purley. The thing is that we just did that because I thought there was a problem. But our goal is to be able to implement this right across the province. So if you feel that you can't do something or you want to solve the problem, you can, as a community member, you can create stuff like this. I just want to tell everybody that that can happen if you engage and engage with all the stakeholders without bias. Like, trust me, we don't carry Juul, we don't carry Vape, but if they're part of the problem, they need to be part of the solution. And at the end of the day, I do believe enforcement and lack of ability in our TOs is one of the bigger problems right now, because federally they're not enforcing anything. They're leaving it into the hands of provincial regulations, and hence some provinces don't have them. So that's my recommendation. Work with your MLAs or MPPs and see if you can create a coalition in your community and have an open roundtable and listen to what you'd be very surprised what their limitations are compared to yours. And you know what? Maybe we can stop some of these people selling it by figuring out where the loopholes are. Anyways, that was just my little comment. I'm going to put myself back on mute now.
Thanks, Maria, as always. And that transitions me well into the last couple of slides. What can you do? The most important thing, if you only do one thing, is call your political leaders to express your concerns and get your customers to do so as well. Ask for meetings. Ask to sit down. Ask to be able to explain how this was critical to you as a smoker. Right? They're going to talk about youth uptake. They're going to talk about other issues that they're concerned, and you let them know. As an industry, we have prescriptive solutions. Right? Call other vape shop owners and ask them to join the campaign. Right? If there's 80 plus MLAs or 300 and some MPs across the country, we need to contact them all. And we need multiple calls going into every one of those organizations, because they talk. They're like, did you get 100 calls? I did. Did you? Absolutely. That's how you start getting this going. If you look at Maria's example, she engages with her local political leadership. It must be every day or every other day. And she's been doing that for a long time, and she's been able to build those relationships. And if you look at from a local level, having a bunch of stakeholders from multi-agencies coming together, that's really powerful. And that's what we need to do across the country, right? We'll be distributing materials. Please use them, and please get them out as broadly as you can. As a non-for-profit, we're always looking for support. We need members, okay? And we need donations to help fund all of these campaigns. And post information about the issues on your websites and social media channels. One of the things we have to do is get more positive stories out and across the board. People are going to hit us from time to time, absolutely. But more importantly is the vast silent majority will pay attention to those items. No one's talking about, and Maria, I can't remember the lady's name that you use, who's 70 all the time, but it's those personal stories about those people who were addicted to combustible tobacco, who we've given years of their life because of the investment that you as business owners have made in this industry. Write a letter to an editor whenever you see a story about an issue, and volunteer. Everyone is volunteers. And, if you're good at communications, please let us know. Specifically in Alberta, you got Danielle, you got Sean Krieger, and you got Anita, and you got myself. And we're here to just do as much as we can and reach as many people as we can during this time. As I mentioned, it's the most unprecedented position that's been taken against the industry, and we want to make sure that we address it head on, and that we address it with as much vigor as we can. So with that, we need people, and we don't have the money. That's what I hear about some of the large tobacco companies. We don't, but boy, we have a lot of people, And together, many hands make light work. So we're asking, and it doesn't matter if it's an hour, if it's one initiative, if you have a really talented marketing person or a really talented writer on your staff or a family member, a journalist, whatever it is, please just make sure that you keep sending us that information so that we can leverage every little strength that we have in order to really get our messages out. So what are our messages? Right? As a harm reduction strategy, e-cigarettes are part of the solution, not part of the problem. All right? They significantly contribute to reducing harm caused by traditional cigarettes. Regulation should reflect the benefit e-cigarettes offer by reducing the consumption of cigarettes. Flavor profiles are key to this platform. Regulation should avoid implementing measures that might discourage people from moving to e-cigarettes, prolonging their use of tobacco products. The goal should be to reduce smoking rates, not nicotine use. Nicotine does not kill people. Vaping is at least 95% safer than combustible tobaccos. Combustible tobacco harm reduction is good public policy, and proper regulations should work towards this goal. Vapor is not the same as combustible tobacco smoke, and therefore should be regulated accordingly. The best way to curb youth uptake is to support adult-only access through product vape shops, a ban on brand-specific national advertising, and ID verified shipping for consumers. These are the messages, right? We have to work on the regulations. I know if we look at some of the inspectors, and I know Maria's ran into them, and John's ran into some issues out in Quebec, and we're going to be able to deal with government with that head on. But these are the messages that Canadians need to understand. Political leaders, Canadians, stakeholders such as Lung and Heart and Stroke and the Lung Society, everyone else. These are all messages that we can stand behind as an industry because they're true. And it's why so many passionate people made this industry their livelihood. This is where they invested their dollars and where they put their families' futures in their passion, which was to save people from dying. Next steps, the industry will continue to educate Canadians on relative risk and harm reduction. Those retail kits will be available in the coming weeks. We have some posters under development, postcards. Media and public campaigns are being designed for release in July. We've already started that. And I know that for you that don't know Sean, he's been out in the news a lot more than I'm sure he wanted to be. Meetings with public officials and political leaders are being arranged. One of the things that the community in Alberta can really do is the more calls you make, the faster we'll get those meetings. So flood your local MLA offices. We need your engagement there. Right? Otherwise, it just looks like the association that is just trying to get meetings with no support behind it. That their people in the local community don't want it, and some nebulous national association does. Right? They need to hear from you. You're what gets them reelected. You're the reason that they're there to serve. Remind them of that. So our plan is simple. As an industry, we must clearly convey the message that vaping saves lives and billions of taxpayer dollars through harm reduction, which significantly lowers health impacts and thus to health costs. Together, we'll fight to ensure that Canada's leading cause of preventable death is addressed. They're not the most difficult messages. I think it's messages that we all stand behind, and it's messages that I need to get out specifically to the MLAs in Alberta, who we haven't clearly touched enough yet with this new government coming in. So with that, I'll open the floor one last time to any questions or comments.
I do have a quick question.
Daryl,
Yep.
should we keep the city councillor letters going?
Absolutely.
I just dropped off 100 today.
Wow. Amazing.
At Winston Churchill Square there at City Hall.
And we should follow that up with a call to the council's office to see if they got those just to get that copy. Right? So that
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you referring to the postcards?
Sorry, was that you, Paul?
Yeah, were you referring to the postcards, whoever was saying that, or letters? You said 100 letters. The postcards?
It was the 100 letters, like the ones that were addressed, those letters for the councillor, Sarah Hamilton.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I dropped off right at City Hall today, 100 of them.
Awesome.
From customers and everybody. We've been really working on that. And the postcard is ready to go for distribution. Right, Daryl?
Yeah. So we'll get that released in the Alberta Advocates Group and in the on the CVA page as well. I guess I have a question for the group. You've gone through the presentation, what our key messages are, and what we're trying to accomplish. Is there any other thoughts, any other ideas from the group?
Daryl, it's John.
Oh, hey, John.
When do you think we're going to need to start funding in Quebec?
You know what? I want to start. Yeah, we'll start that campaign here by the end of next week. I believe that the appeal is probably another 6 weeks away. We'll understand what we're facing when it comes in.
And I heard you earlier talking about my experience there with the federal inspector who arrived at our store recently. And I don't know how many people in this room saw my video or whatever I did online, because I was quite surprised, because so far all the inspections, or they weren't inspections. And when I said that to the inspector, he said, no, they weren't inspections. They were compliance promotions. And now this is a real inspection. So before they were just promoting compliance. But in all those compliance promotions, they always focused on the juice. And they saw all my hardware and never really said anything. And so when they came time for the inspection and they said the Falcon coils had to lose the Falcon, my Kendo Vape cotton got seized, my cotton candy got seized, and one juice that I didn't manage to swap on time. So about 8 bottles of juice that they put in a bag. They sealed it up, put it in the back, and said, okay, you need to come up with a plan within 60 days and communicate to us the plan of what you're going to do to become in compliance with these products that we've taken. And if you open the bag, you get a fine of $500. So we can't touch the sealed bag that they've left in back of the store, which I found kind of weird. And so, yeah, it was kind of odd. The whole experience freaked me out because I looked at my store and I have a lot more experience than the inspector does. So I start scrutinizing all my gear and I'm like, whoa, about 30% of it, I could consider it non-compliant right now. So it makes it very difficult for me to, like, even just purchasing and making an order. I want to see the product before I buy it because I'm worried that they're going to put a little snail on their logo or something that's going to make it non-compliant. And I know you guys said you're looking for definition, but for me right now, I operate with that definition that if there's a character on my Falcon coils or whatever, I got to put a sticker, but I really got to stop selling it because the sticker is temporary. It's not something I could do for 2-3 years, you know?
No.
So,
John, the key is on that one is it's from these experiences from coast to coast, and I have about 12 of them that I'm really trying to drive this committee with the Fed so we can get into some of these practical issues, right, and really break it down because that and Sam's been trying to get definitions from the feds for a little over a year. he asks every time we're on the call, and every time they say, "Yeah, we'll look at something. We're considering, something," but that has nothing to do with the issue that they say they're trying to address, which is the youth uptake issue, right? Well, we're trying to really drive them into, and if I don't hear anything from the feds next week, I'll do another release. That we've reached out to the feds multiple times on the youth uptake issue and have heard nothing. Right? It's time, and I think you would admit, John, in the last 2 or 3 months, we've taken a far more aggressive stance as an organization with government. Right? We're starting to push harder, and we're starting to push harder out loud.
We have, and I'm proud of Quebec. But you want to hear a funny thing? The funny thing is those products, the Kendo Vape and the cotton candy, I had to go look and find out who I bought it from to communicate to the vendor and tell him, hey, buddy, are you taking this back? And I'd look, and it was purchased in 2016 by the previous owner of the business that I purchased it from. And it was just so funny because this product was deemed attractive to teenagers and stuff, but it hasn't even been sold in the last 3 years.
Yeah, no kidding. That is
totally off mark. It doesn't, like, if they wanted to achieve anything, they would be way smarter in like attacking Juul or doing something like that. Although even I wouldn't agree with that either. But I don't know. They're off the mark. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's our job to try to get them on the mark, right? That's really why why the collective is here, right? And why we're all banding together is to hold our political leaders accountable to get them on the mark. So. With that, Sam, I know we're up at an hour, so did you want to make any closing comments?
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's a lot that the industry is facing, and of course, there's a lot of work that we need to do. But I think what's most important is the vape industry is extremely united. We have a lot of advocates that are, of course, doing their part, engaging the MPs and engaging the public and in the vape industry. And of course, we have to keep going. CAV is going to do its work. Of course, we're going to continuously put pressure onto the government to work more closely with us. We've even, it's really interesting, just to give, many of you a little bit more insight. I've been contacting the companies that conduct the child-resistant test and, to deal with the issues of course, what's coming with Gazette 1, with the child-resistant tanks, and working with the manufacturers on this issue. And I can tell you that, the government's really not ready to implement such a standard. There is no standard when it comes to child-resistant tanks, because the mechanism on the tank is not similar to a mechanism on a container, which is pretty much standard for containers. So there's a lot we're going to do. And of course, in the next couple months, we're going to be kickstarting a number of initiatives. And of course, Daryl and myself will continue to engage the Alberta government. We are pressing on not only Alberta, but even the BC government. We are trying to get the hold of those meetings so we can actually, address, what the vape industry has been doing. We have been working with government, not only government, but also with the Crown Corporation like Canada Post. When issues with packaging not utilizing age verification procedures, we've sent those to not only Canada Post to address that to them, being of concern that, hey, this is a mandated by the government that all vaping products be has to send through age of verification shipping procedures. But Canada Post themselves, I guess the level of training that's being brought to their staff is not really implemented across the board, right? So we have to continue to put pressure on the government to show them that we are constantly, as an industry, trying to be responsible. So, so there's a lot of work to do, and I'd like to thank those that have participated in today's meeting. Of course, what Daryl mentioned, anyone here that would like to lend a helping hand, the more people of course, the stronger the efforts.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Sam. And as I end every meeting, if you need to get in touch with me, send me an email at dtempest@thecva.org or flip me a note on Facebook. For that, thank you everyone for tonight, and I'll announce the next meeting within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and of course we'll be updating anything that happens in Alberta or federally, both in the Alberta advocacy page and then on the CVA members page as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Have a good night.